Hello viewers, thank you for joining me. This month's poll was a fun one to watch. It ended up being a pretty close battle, but Juni Taisen did have the lead from the beginning, and I'm not surprised it pulled off the victory. I remember there being a lot of buzz around this one when it first came out. Juni Taisen, or Zodiac War, is pretty self-explanatory. Once every 12 years, 12 warriors, corresponding to the 12 animals of the Chinese zodiac, come together to fight one big battle royale. The winner is granted seemingly any wish of their choosing. The whole tournament takes place in a single night. When they're all first brought together, they're instructed to swallow a jewel. Afterward, it's revealed that the jewels were actually capsules full of poison. In roughly 12 hours, it'll start interacting with their stomach acid, and they'll all die anyway. The last one standing must collect all the other jewels from their rivals' bodies to be given the antidote, and then their wish. So the story moved pretty fast, and was fun in a violent sort of way. I'm not usually much of a binge watcher, but this show made it very easy to just keep going from one episode to the next. I guess this anime can be summed up by saying that it fell short in areas I hadn't been worried about, but actually really impressed me in places I'd been expecting it to fail. The first episode follows the warrior of the boar. Her father won the last Taisen, so she's approaching this from the mindset of being the defending champion. This introduction establishes a few key things. Each of the zodiac animals has a patron family, basically. The chosen warrior isn't always the family heir like the boar, but it's a matter of great pride to compete. All the most powerful world leaders come together to bet on the winner, and it's said that gambling on that scale can change the whole terrain of the world, depending on the winner. And that's really the only backstory or world building we ever get. I have to be honest, I was expecting more in that regard. A greater purpose for this war. Even the organizer, or host, or referee, or whatever you want to call him, totally comes across as someone sinister enough to pull out some twist at the end, reveal he was the real evil all along, but nothing ever comes of that either. But we'll talk about the ending in due time. I don't want to give the impression it was all bad. I went into this hoping for a strong story, but accepting that the characters were probably going to be a weak point. For a show that's this short, with this many characters revolving around a plotline where they're all killing each other off, they actually do a pretty great job developing them all. They weren't all likable or sympathetic, but they didn't have to be. There were usually just enough warriors that I still liked or wanted to root for to carry the story. And I think they made some really smart decisions with how they laid out that character development. Introducing Boar first, so the audience gets to know at least a little of the culture surrounding the Zodiac War, immediately establishing Ox as the warrior to watch out for, but only slowly developing him through his interactions with the others. How almost no one was quite what they first seemed. Snake and Dragon, who are twins, get developed pretty late into the series, right around the time I was thinking there was maybe no one left I wanted to root for. Snake and Dragon were probably the least likable of the whole group. Rabbit was actually insane, but there was something childish and broken about him too that at least opened up the possibility of sympathizing with him. The twins are introduced as a pair of thieves who only care about money, but in a flashback we see them brought before some kind of court, accusing them of not acting in ways befitting of the honorable warriors they're meant to be, and wanting them held accountable like any other criminals. And we see that the twins used to be Robin Hood-type figures. Most of what they stole was given to people who were suffering, but if they checked back in later, they'd see that the people they helped never really got a happy ending. They just went on to suffer under the next corrupt leader. It really disillusioned them, and Dragon points out that, for all their talk of honor, the warriors are really just mercenaries. Which side of the conflict is considered the right one to fight for all depends on who hires them. His argument basically boils down to, the world we're fighting for is corrupt, so why should we alone be held to Saturday morning cartoon ideals of goodness and justice? As far as world building goes, it was all still pretty vague, but the message came at just the right time. It basically reshaped my whole view on who to root for. This tournament is not being held for any kind of respectable purpose with a greater good in mind, so it's not exactly a tragedy if a good person doesn't win it. I try not to let myself go off on too many tangents, ramble about too many things I liked over the course of a show if it doesn't feel like those points really say anything about the greater story. But I mentioned that the characters were a surprising high point, so it would feel remiss if I didn't talk about a few of them, give you more of an idea of what you're in for. The series immediately draws your attention to Monkey, the most stereotypically good of the group. In a room of people who mostly kill for a living, the warrior of the monkey has made a name for herself as a pacifist, and an extremely skilled martial artist, but mostly she's known for going to battlefields and negotiating peace talks. To be honest, I found Monkey just a little disappointing. For all they talk up her negotiating skills, the example they show of it wasn't all that impressive, and Monkey herself isn't all that satisfied by her life's accomplishments. Where she tended to shine was with her one-on-one interactions. On several occasions, we're treated to her internal monologue as she's observing the other warriors. We see the places she finds them immature, or just not as well trained as they might think they are. But she never calls them out on those things, and she never really looks down on them for their shortcomings either. She's always mindful of not hurting anyone's feelings just to make a point. If anything, she seems to find those flaws almost endearing, and you can tell she wants to see each of these other warriors reach their full potential and make something of their lives. She struck me as having an older sisterly vibe, and those moments moved me more than all the talk of her professional achievements. I don't want to reveal too many deaths before we get into the spoiler section, but Sheep's was the first one that felt really tragic. When they first started getting into his character and his motivations, I couldn't believe this wacky old man was the first character I could feel myself getting truly attached to. We're on the 12th Juni Taisen. Boar's father won the 11th. Sheep won the 9th, almost 40 years ago, as he goes into how he's already had so much more happiness than someone who's lived a life like his had any right to deserve. How he entered again, the oldest warrior by at least 20 years, just to spare his children or grandchildren from it. He was the first character I really wanted to win just because he was so likable. I don't mind spoiling his death, because it's one of the ones you can see coming from a mile away. Sheep immediately extracts himself from the group, holes up, and starts planning. Unfortunately, like I said, the story moves fast. By the time he finishes those plans and heads back out onto the battlefield, the terrain has shifted a lot. A lot of the people he was planning to team up with are already dead. His calculations are so flawed that there's no way this is going to end well for him. But it was still sad to see him go. And the most impressive character to me was Tiger, who I honestly forgot about until Sheep wanders across her at the end of episode 5. She didn't go into hiding, just raided the nearest liquor store and drank herself into a stupor in the park. But as Sheep soon learns, that doesn't affect her ability to fight at all. Tiger goes on to get the most extensive backstory of anyone, exploring how she grew up in a dojo and had those typical ideals of honor really embedded into her, until she was sent out into the real world and saw firsthand the senselessness of the violence of a real battlefield. Her alcoholism is a direct result of PTSD. But just when she was at her lowest, she ran into a warrior who did still embody the sort of honor and justice she'd been raised to believe in. Since then, she's tried to live her life following his example. Her goal is to meet him again one day and be acknowledged as an equal. And, of course, this man is one of the other warriors competing here. I feel like I really need to get into the end to properly talk about this series as a whole, so we are about to enter a spoiler section. For anyone who's leaving me here, this show has its ups and downs. A recommendation really depends on your ability, or willingness, to overlook shortcomings like weak world building surrounding why this tournament even exists and the effect it has on the world, most of the characters' motivations for competing, and, unfortunately, a conclusion that's a pretty big letdown. But I do have to say, as a chronic overanalyzer and someone who would normally judge a show pretty harshly for those weaknesses, I enjoyed this one quite a lot. The Battle Royale was fast-paced and fun, but there would be no recommendation from me if the only high point was the spectacle of the battles. What really won me over with this one were the characters and the writing decisions made to plot out the explorations of those characters. 12 episodes is not a lot of time, and if they could only prioritize one of those things, I think they made the right choice. But I do want to talk about that last episode, so spoilers ahead. In a twist reflecting the original Zodiac legend that I really liked, Rat waits until the others have mostly taken each other out before pulling off a victory with one of the explosives Sheep left behind. Something else the series never really explained is that, though this seems to be based in a pretty realistic world, some warriors also just inexplicably have magic powers. Boar never needed to reload her weapons, Dragon could fly, Rabbit could raise the dead and enslave them as his personal army. And Rat reveals at the end that he's also been relying on a special ability. He can basically see the future. As the victor, they at least break down how his power works, and it's not without its limitations and drawbacks. The 100 Paths of the Rat allows him to experience the outcomes of 100 possible decisions for every challenge he's faced with, but not just the endings. It only takes an instant, but he experiences each life as if it's happening in real time, and of the 100 possible scenarios he came up with to approach this death battle tournament, the timeline the anime follows is the only one where he survived. So in the past 12 hours, he's experienced his own death 99 times. Rat's only a teenager, the youngest competitor by the looks of it, but he comes across as extremely cynical and constantly exhausted, and once his ability is explained, it makes a lot of sense that he'd be so worn down. And consider that this is only one night in his life. He is a trained warrior like the others, and also has battlefield experience, so this won't have been the first time he's felt like he's died, only to be spat back out at the moment of the crucial decision. And it's not the last, either. Episode 11 ends with Rat sitting down with the host, giving an interview to go over his strategy and overall thoughts on the battle, but only after exploring dozens, possibly the full 100, paths where he just walks out and gets on with his life. But every single timeline where he leaves the building after refusing the interview ends in another of his deaths, some seeming like they could be accidents, some just clear, flat-out murders. It was a really great, eerie sequence. Definitely cemented in the host as this villainous mastermind, if I'd had any doubt before, which did make it a disappointment that nothing ever comes of that. But the real focus of the final episode is Rat deciding on what he wants for his victory wish. And ultimately, Rat decides that what he wants is to forget the whole experience, which was its own kind of letdown. I don't think there was such an option as a perfect wish that would have solved everything, but has anyone ever been satisfied by this sort of "it was a dream all along" type ending? Interestingly, though Juni Taisen does have a manga, it's also an adaptation. The original story is from a novel, which I ordered as soon as I found that out. I haven't had time to properly read it start to finish, but I have, let's say, thoroughly skimmed it. It looks like it doesn't really add anything to the world building, but does give a little more insight into the characters. But what was really interesting was that its story ends where episode 11 does, before Rat decides on a wish. Story-wise, I think leaving it open-ended would have been the less disappointing choice. I'm not sure this tale could have felt complete without an entire second season and another storyline, one that examined the things going on behind the scenes with these Zodiac wars. But I also can't say the final episode was all bad. Along his other paths, Rat got to know the other Zodiac warriors. While trying to decide on a wish of his own, he reflects on all of their dreams. It was a nice callback to the things this series did well, a reminder of better days, kind of, and when I look back at this one in a few months, I hope it is the good things that stick with me. Juni Taisen is the kind of show where I can totally see how someone else might have been really disappointed with it. I found most of it pretty enjoyable. It's enjoyable in a casual way, it's a good time if you don't ask too many questions kind of way. And while I totally would have been down for a second season that fleshed out the world more, sometimes a casual watch is what you need. Thank you for watching.